A U.S. judge sets the bail for Derek Chauvin, the policeman who suffocated George Floyd to death, at $1.25 million. A humanitarian flight from Iran touches down in Venezuela. And the World Health Organization says the pandemic appears to be worsening globally. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is from the South. United States Democrats knelt for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in Congress to honor murdered African-American George Floyd. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Leader Chuck Schumer led dozens of lawmakers in a tribute to Floyd. The Democratic Party is preparing to unveil a police reform proposal for debate in response to the act. 8 minutes and 46 seconds is the length of time prosecutors say Floyd was pinned under a white police officer's knee before he died.
That tragedy, that horror of history, then slavery in our own country, and then all of the consequences of that. We are here to observe that pain. We are here to respect the actions of the American people, to speak out against that, specifically manifested in police brutality. We are here to honor George Floyd.
George Floyd's casket has arrived in Houston for a memorial service. Mourners will be able to view the body in his hometown, which is the final stop of a series of memorials. The viewing will take place at the Fountain of Praise Church in Southwest Houston. The funeral is set for Tuesday, and he will be buried at the Houston Memorial Garden Cemetery in suburban Pearland. Meanwhile, Derek Chauvin, the main police officer in Floyd's killing, has had his bail set at $1.25 million. Chauvin faces second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter charges and appeared in court via a video monitor from the Oak Park Heights prison, where he's held. He faces up to 40 years in prison if convicted. Meanwhile, head of the World Health Organization has expressed his support for movements that are protesting against racism globally. However, he has urged demonstrators to take caution amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
WHO fully supports equality and the global movement against racism. We reject discrimination of all kinds. We encourage all those protesting around the world to do so safely. As much as possible, keep at least 1 meter from others. Clean your hands, cover your cough, and wear a mask if you attend a protest. We remind all people to stay home if you're sick and contact a healthcare provider. We also encourage countries to strengthen the fundamental public health measures that remain the basis of the response: find, isolate, test and care for every case, and trace and quarantine every contact.
Protesters have held a moment of silence in Grenada for George Floyd, who was suffocated by a policeman in Minneapolis. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, demonstrators knelt with their heads bowed while holding posters inscribed with the words "Black Lives Matter." The group upheld social distancing rules as they also condemned the United Kingdom, whose laws also promote systematic racism. To this end, they held posters reading "The UK is not innocent" and "Black Lives Matter."
My daughter is over there. And, you know, when she showed it to me, I said, that is fake news. I thought it was fake. I did not want to believe it. It wasn't until a few hours later, when my phone started to ring from my colleagues here and afar, that I realized that this is indeed reality. And brothers and sisters, I am hurting. I am hurting for George Floyd. I am hurting for our brothers and sisters in America. We have campaigned for decades for the removal of the statue of Edward Cornwall. Yes, the slave trader who profited from selling our ancestors like cattle. pedestal and beyond. These profits, let's keep the context. These profits resulted in our ancestors, yes, making a significant contribution to the British Industrial Revolution.
Scores of people in Trinidad and Tobago have also held a Black Lives Matter protest. The protesters gathered in front of the United States Embassy in Queen's Park, Savannah, to join global movement in condemnation of the murder of George Floyd in the United States.
More people will come and stand with us. No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! And it would be a shame if we came out here today saying Black Lives Matter, and then when we decide that the Columbus statue had to come down, nobody shows up.
The opposition People's Progressive Party Civic PPPC is celebrating victory in Guyana's March 2nd general elections after the recount of the controversial Region 4 ballots. Although the results have not been officially declared by Guyana's Election Commission, the PPPC is in the lead with more than 15,000 votes over the ruling and Partnership for National Unity and Alliance for Change coalition. Both parties had declared themselves the winner of the polls, drawing a concern from regional and international leaders. A 25-day recount was ordered and then extended to June 13th.
Over 15,000 votes.
The Secretary General of the 54-nation Commonwealth has called on political leaders to accept the results of the national recount in Guyana, saying the bloc is continuing to pay close attention to the electoral process in the country. Patricia Scotland reminded that the Commonwealth had urged for full transparency and adherence to the rule of law when the recount started on May 6. She also thanked citizens for their patience. Dr. Timothy Harris has been sworn in for a second term as Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. Harris will lead for the next 5 years as his Team Unity coalition won 8 of the 11 seats in the elections held on Friday. This is one more seat than his 2015 election victory.
I promise the administration which I will lead will not let down the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Today, the work of building more homes, bigger and larger, of creating new jobs and new opportunities for our young people, and continuing to keep our people and country safe. Today, that work begins in earnest. We shall create the modern history of St. Kitts and Nevis by making it the example of the best managed small island state.
We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. A humanitarian flight carrying medical aid from Iran has arrived in Venezuela. Venezuelan Planning Minister Ricardo Menéndez said the flight is part of a cooperation agreement between the two countries at a time when both nations are suffering from crippling U.S. sanctions. The shipment includes testing kits and other medical equipment to help the fight against COVID-19. As of Monday, Venezuela reported 2,377 COVID-19 cases and 22 deaths.
We have received various test kits and medical equipment from Iran. This move is a great example of cooperation between these two nations. President Maduro has announced that when it will be possible, he will travel to Iran to thank the Iranian people for their solidarity.
Iran's ambassador in Venezuela has ensured that the relationship between Tehran and Caracas will continue to move forward.
As far as I am concerned, fortunately, I am well. I'm following the recommendations of the doctors, the specialists, which we must all follow regardless of our position, performance, or work.
That was the President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Let's stay in Venezuela, where its Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has imposed a 7-day lockdown after allowing some movement for 7 days. This measure called 7x7, seeks to prevent the spread of COVID-19 while also allowing the restart of various economic sectors. Let's have a look.
We must be very respectful towards all the measures taken by the President. One of those measures is the 7x7. 7 days of flexibilization that ended yesterday with the President's balance. And today, the strict quarantine kicks off. As long as we respect these 7 days of quarantine, we may be able to reincorporate other areas of the country's economy. The level of responsibility and discipline is crucial. When we take care of ourselves, then we take care of others so that we can soon say it is thanks to the Venezuelan people that we were able to control this pandemic.
Moving on, Ecuadorians have returned to the streets for the 3rd day to protest recently announced economic measures. Approved in the end of May, the so-called humanitarian support law allows companies to modify working hours for their employees, including cutting shifts in half if necessary, and also allows employers to significantly reduce salaries. Various social organizations as well as workers' unions demand President Moreno dismiss these measures, which were allegedly imposed to mitigate the economic crisis brought by the pandemic. Protesters are also denouncing massive layoffs, especially among public workers and in the education sector since the start of the pandemic. Our correspondent Denise Herrera in Quito has more.
Several organizations of workers are marching today against the recent economic measures taken by the government of President Lenin Moreno. Today, the workers in Ecuador are rejecting these neoliberal decisions. They said that the government is taking these decisions to benefit all the private sectors in the country. As you can see behind me, all the Ecuadorian citizens and workers are marching through the main streets in Quito in rejection of these decisions. They are also asking the dismissal of the economic minister, Richard Martinez. They said that Richard Martinez it just benefits the private sector and the bank sector in the country.
That was our correspondent Denise Herrera in Quito. People in Kenya have taken to the streets in Nairobi to protest against police brutality as the number of police-related killings during the country's nighttime curfew reaches 15. According to the independent policing oversight body, the Kenyan police have been involved in the killing of 15 people, and there have nearly 90 complaints against the law enforcement since the dusk to dawn curfew and heightened security measures were imposed on March 27th. The complaints include deaths, shootings, harassment, assault, robbery, inhumane treatment, and sexual assault.
We are sick and tired of the police brutality. We want justice for everyone, regardless whether in Kenya, all over the world, LGBT, anybody, Black Lives Matter. We just want justice. There's no need of violence. Nobody needs to be killed. Nobody needs to be beaten. All you can do is peace.
South African schools have partially reopened as the government has gradually lifted lockdown restrictions. Only grade 7 and 12 students are allowed to resume classes. However, attendance has been low because some parents remain hesitant over the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic. South Africa has the largest number of cases in the continent with 46,000 infections and almost 1,000 deaths.
If the parent says,
what we need to do is to make up mechanism of sustainability so that this that you see here must not be for today. It is a continuous, it must be a way of life. It's a new normal. They'll have to get used. Every day, these soap stations must be there. The kids must know that, from time to time, I wash my hands.
Hundreds of Palestinians have protested in the West Bank city of Ramallah against Israel's plan to annex sections of the territory. The demonstrators marched through the streets carrying Palestinian flags and banners with messages denouncing the policy. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to go ahead with his annexation plans from July. The move came after a controversial so-called Middle East peace plan presented by U.S. President Donald Trump in January.
We are fully confident in our ability to confront and thwart their plans against the Palestinian people on one condition, and that is being united.
We'll be right back, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. The World Health Organization has warned that the pandemic appears to be worsening worldwide, with more than 136,000 new cases reported globally in the last 24 hours. The UN body did support anti-racism protests, but urged people to take care.
Although the situation in Europe is improving, globally it's worsening. More than 100,000 cases have been reported on 9 of the past 10 days. Yesterday, more than 136 cases were reported, the most in a single day so far.
Monday, June 8th.
Okay, thank you.
WHO fully supports equality and the global movement against racism. We reject discrimination of all kinds. We encourage all those protesting around the world to do so safely. As much as possible, keep at least 1 meter from others. Clean your hands, cover your cough, and wear a mask if you attend a protest.
The Russian capital, Moscow, will lift general lockdown measures at 9 p.m. Tuesday on June 9th, allowing residents to travel freely for the first time since late March. Russia has been moving quickly to ease restrictions, despite registering thousands of cases on a daily basis.
Moscow is returning to the usual rhythm of life. Starting tomorrow, the 9th of June, the general lockdown and pass system will end. In a week, on the 16th of June, dentists, libraries, real estate offices and companies that provide services to residents will be able to resume their work.
The Spanish capital, Madrid, has entered the second phase of easing virus lockdown measures. This means restaurants and shops can now reopen regardless of their size, but only at 40% of their capacity.
We do not expect an easy month of July and August for the establishment that we open. Perhaps from September we will begin to recover the rhythm a little more. In any case, I understand that by July most of them will be open with the total internal and external capacity, and that if emphasizing that all establishments of the central area are opening with all security measures. We are talking about perfectly prepared premises. The terraces, as you can see, with all the separate furniture, with safety distance.
Residents of a refugee camp in the Greek island of Lesbos says the government has not provided them with sufficient support in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are nearly 18,000 people that live in the camp, and even before the pandemic, they had limited resources. While the camp has so far avoided coronavirus infections, sanitary conditions are far from ideal to handle a local outbreak, and the camp is getting more arrivals every week. While movement restriction has been lifted across Greece in the beginning of May, refugees in the camp have only been allowed to leave since then. In the United Kingdom, anti-racism protesters in the city of Bristol pulled down a statue of a 17th century slave trader, Edward Colston, and dropped it into the city's river. The statue had been a focal point of local controversy for years, with many citizens, including a former Bristol MP, calling for it to be taken down. Our correspondent Pablo Navarrete has more from London.
Black Lives Matter protesters in the English city of Bristol pulled down the statue of Edward Colston, a notorious 17th century slave trader, and pushed it into the nearby Bristol harbour. Now, these images have been widely shared in the British media and across the world, actually, and have sparked a debate on the role of British empire and slave trade and racism in Britain today. Now, the act was condemned by the Johnson government's Minister of the Interior, the Home Secretary Priti Patel. The new Labour leader, Keir Starmer, who's also much more in the politically centre ground, condemned the way it was taken down, although he did say it shouldn't have been up in the first place. Residents in Bristol had asked in the past for the statue to be taken down, but it hadn't been. Now, Colston was, as I said, a prominent member of the Royal African Company, which oversaw in the late 17th century the transportation of over 80,000 slaves, of which more than 20% died en route. And so this downing of the statue has also been welcomed by a number of Labour members of Parliament, including black members of Parliament like Dawn Butler. Now, in London, Black Lives Matter protesters also came out on Saturday and Sunday, and there was a very aggressive response, policing of these protests by the British security services, which saw them charge protesters with horses. Now, this was condemned by human rights and ethnic minority groups as overly aggressive as well. They were kettled until 1:30 in the morning, prevented from leaving the space and not allowed access to toilets. So these Black Lives Matters protests continue in the UK in the wake of the murder of George Floyd by the US police.
We thank our correspondent Pablo Navarrete for that report. An Iranian scientist who has been detained in the United States for 60 months has returned home after a prisoner swap. Majid Taheri was arrested for allegedly violating U.S. medical sanctions while working at a clinic in Florida. He was freed on Thursday after Iran released U.S. Navy officer Michael White, who had been detained in the country since July 2018. Meanwhile, the Iranian government has called on the U.S. to release all of the Middle Eastern countries' nationals that are in custody.
We hope that this process of the full release of all Iranian prisoners in the United States will continue. As we have repeatedly stated, Iran is fully prepared to exchange all prisoners, and the United States government is responsible for this procrastination.
The trial of the former deputy head of administrative affairs in Iran's judiciary has started in the capital, Tehran. State television broadcasted the hearing for Akbar Tabari in a rare move. Tabari is accused of corruption, money laundering, and influence trading alongside 21 other officials. He is alleged to have obstructed the execution of justice against influential senior Iranian officials by forming a criminal group within his office, which became a center for certain accused individuals to settle their cases. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, has officially announced the extension of its initial agreement signed on April 12th to cut production by 9.7 million barrels per day. This comes after oil prices started to recover as most countries have restarted economic activity. Commodity prices had plummeted as a result of falling demand around the world due to strict lockdowns to stem the spread of COVID-19. Saudi Arabia and Russia had put aside their differences to make the deal possible after a long-standing price war. The next OPEC meeting is scheduled for December 1st in Vienna, where the organization is based.
The very fact that all countries have supported the compensation mechanism is a demonstration of their willingness to fully implement the agreement. This is the first time that such a mechanism is put in place, and I believe this is a significant progress and gives more credibility to OPEC.
The British oil giant BP has announced plans to cut close to 10,000 jobs due to COVID-19, despite oil prices showing signs of rebounding in recent weeks as lockdowns are lifted. BP says the majority of job cuts will come from office staff, while pay rises for senior staff members and cash bonuses in general will also be scrapped. The company slumped into a $4.4 billion net loss in the first quarter, during which time Bob Dudley stepped down as group CEO after a decade at the top. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.